everyone. Live from our home studio here in North Minneapolis. This is the weekly edition of Bright Lights, our weekly excursion into the world of achievement, achievement through goal setting, achievement through hard work, uh, good decision making, tenacity, and all those good things. And we do focus on achievement. And what we seek to do is to introduce you to achievers and hear their stories and the things they had to overcome to get where they are, and share that with you and share some light on that. Thus, the title "Bright Lights." Uh, so now, and what I like about Bright Lights, to be honest with you, if you pay attention, especially when they're talking about the Black community, most of the things that they're talking about to our children, and our children are so important and special to me, has to do with all the obstacles they have to overcome, all the unfairness in the world, and no one is giving them positive messages. And I'm here to give everyone, especially our children, a positive message, because I do believe that they can achieve anything they set their minds to. And I want them to know that. I want them to know that we are here to help them achieve their goals, and we just want to show them how to do it. So, but before we get to our guest tonight, and I'm very excited about it, a couple of things. Well, first thing is I'm finally back in the gym after what, 16, 18 months or so. And actually, they had closed the gym down, and a lot of crazy things, working hard, going out to dinner, and everywhere you go there's food and things like that. But always promised myself a couple of things in my old age. First, I wouldn't get old and fat and with my stomach hanging over my belt. And secondly, I would never retire. uh, as I explained it to my wife, I do not want to coast to the finish line. When I get to the finish line, I want to be running full speed. And so those are the two things I promised myself. So I've been in the gym every day this week, and I said to my wife again, I'm gonna do it for 21 straight days, because that's how you break bad habits. Watching what I eat, and hopefully you'll see a difference here. Or at least I'll see a difference and feel a difference. And I needed more energy, and it's kind of ironic, I guess, counterintuitive, that the more you expend energy in exercising, uh, the more energy that you have. And so that's the way that works. It's kind of consistent. And many of you know me, I got this Southern Baptist background. It's kind of consistent with the teachings of Jesus, which seem counterintuitive a lot of times, like love thy enemy. It's better to give than receive. And so it's all consistent with that. And we'll get into that sometimes, and even bring in some type of scientific laws and principle to that particular item. Now, like I say, before we get started with our guest tonight, I talked about three things. The first thing is my exercise. The second thing is we've had some serious uh, incidents in Minneapolis. And I'll start with three of our young children shot in the head. People, what are we doing? And I don't want to hear a lot of excuses from anyone excusing that behavior. And we really need to do something about it. And I'll talk about that a little later also. And then there was this 10 people shot, 2 people killed at a nightclub in downtown Minneapolis. And, that's got to stop. But here's the thing, and I've been consistent in this: there are no short term solutions to this thing. There are no easy solutions. I hope I'm wrong, but in my opinion, the best thing we can do now, hope for, is basically to stop the bleeding while we come up with long term solutions that get to the root causes. And I've been fairly consistent about what I think are the root causes and things we need to do. First, economics. I preach economic justice. I want to see people with money in their pocket, enough money where they can send their children to college, enough money where they can take the family out to eat, enough money where if their children need something, they can provide it. Now, having said that, I tell everyone, and with my children need to hear no. even if you can do it for them, just say no to them sometime. And I'm just so happy that my parents said no to me. I'm not happy about the things they said no to. They said no to a bicycle because they thought me and my brother, we'd be out on the road and get hit by a car. And they said no to a BB gun. And of course, you know why they're, because we were bad little kids. Well, we were just being kids. And then probably the toughest thing of all, they said no to Chuck Taylor Converse All-Star tennis shoes. So normally, when we were in gym, just about everybody had Converse All Stars on, and I had the $2 Kent dollar store shoes that I tried to paint stars on that look like Converse, but it never worked. And in fact, to this very day, I cannot draw a star. And I'm a pretty good artist too, but I can't draw a star. So it's good to say no to our children sometimes. But here's the thing. Uh, I've been pretty straight on what I thought we need to do to get to the root cause. And I've been pretty straight on the fact that unless we get to the root causes, there's no solution to these things. And I know it's hard, it's going to take time, but here's the thing. I believe in my heart, soul, and mind we can do this. Uh, Once again, economic development, money, wealth creation, generation wealth creation, quality education. And when I say quality education, I'm talking about education of the poorest and most needy, and those from the most. And I really don't like this phrase, but I'll use it because I haven't found a better one to help everybody understand what I'm talking about. At risk, those from at risk environments. Really need to find out a way to educate those children. And we'll get back to, because a lot of people point at charter schools and the success they're having, but there is a set of our children. Well, let me say this. If a child is in charter school, 9 times out of 10 at least, that means that the parent is care about their education and is involved in their education. The challenge, I think, is those children that's from those tough situations where the parents may not be involved in the situation. The parents are facing all kinds of difficulty and stress, and from stress and trauma and self-medicating. How do we educate those children? And once again, even though it's challenging, I know it can be done. And how do I know that? We work with Reverend McAfee and the New Salem Church to start a charter school. And we took those type of children and we educated them. And I think Reverend McAfee had pointed out one time that at the end of the school year, those children were scoring in the 85 percentile nationally. And so the education is another part of it. And then family. We really need to understand the importance of two parents, families, and I'm just going to be 100, as they say, the importance of dads in the homes. And once again, being 100. And I'm going to go straight to that one too. It might not be politically correct. Marriage. And we need to start marrying the mothers of our children. And as men, you know, that's how we get our satisfaction. At least that's how I get mine, by taking care of my family and my children. And it's not about us. So we really need to start thinking about. We need to work towards the goal of two parents family and marrying the mothers of our children. And once again, what I found out, and I'll wrap this up, get our guests on, is that it's pretty difficult to reach your peak as a man being single. And I know there are people out there that disagree with me, but that's what I found. It made me a better man. It challenged me to change. It challenged me to not be so selfish. It challenged me to not look at my own goals. So let's repeat. Business economic development with the goal of creating generational wealth, quality education, family, and last for me is just faith. That was the foundation. And, other people might have other ways of creating a lighthouse in their life, which when you get off track, you know how to get back on track, get off course, you know how to get back on course. But that's what my faith did for me. And, we all go through those young stages and where we want to sow some wild oats and things like that. But faith is what kept me, was my lighthouse that guided me through things. So having said all of that, and just one last thing as far as root causes, You know, and I'm talking mostly to my Black community right now. A lot of times when we look at the issues facing our communities, we tend to look out the window at the world and people and bad things and bad people. And I want to suggest to people who are out there who are trying to solve these issues that we should spend more time looking in the mirror instead of looking out the window. And until we do that, I don't think we're going to get to the root of a lot of these issues. And there's a lot of people out there who got us confused looking out the window at other people and how unfair life is and how bad all these bad people are. But I'm convinced that we have in our own control to solve these issues if we commit ourselves and willing to sacrifice to get them solved. So that's it for my introduction this evening. And let's bring on our guest. I'm very proud to have as our guest today, Illescas, Felipe Illescas, who has done a lot of work in the Latino community. And, you know, I'm just a diversity person. A lot of people talk diversity like they talk love. A lot of people, when they say they love you, they mean I love you as long as you're making me happy and you're doing what I want you to do. And once that, I'm not loving you anymore. And I'm saying that to say this. A lot of people who talk diversity say, I'm all in favor of diversity as long as you agree with me and as long as you don't strongly disagree with me. But here's the thing. When I say diversity, I really mean it. I don't care what group you fall into. I welcome you and your opinions as long as you're respectful personally and as long as you obey the law. Those are the only two rules I have for people. And then otherwise, I'll sit and listen and talk and dialogue with anyone. And once again, just diversity of people, just race, color, creeds, religion, we go for it. And I say that because, like I say, Mr. Felipe Illescas is from the Latino community, and I have a lot of great friends in that community. So right now, we'll bring on our guest, Mr. Felipe Illescas. Hey, good evening, Felipe. How you doing?
Good, Lacey. Thank you very much for the invitation to be here tonight.
Okay, thank you for taking the time out to be here. Okay, so first, Felipe, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how did you end up in Minnesota doing all the great work that you're doing? And I think you took had a couple of stopovers for before you got here. So just tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to Minnesota.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I was born in Mexico City. And like many other people, you know, I was brought here to the US by my parents when I was very young. So I ended up growing up in LA. And then from LA, well, when I was in LA, when I was, I don't know, 17 years old, my parents moved to Minnesota. And, the following, like the dream, right? Like looking for better opportunities. And I stayed in LA for another 5 years, studying business administration. And then at that point, my dad wanted to start a business, and it just made sense for me to move to Minnesota for a year to help out and, get the business going. And we did, and I ended up staying. So I've been in Minnesota for a while now.
Well, you sound like a lot of people who've been in Minnesota for a while and who was moving out every year for the past 20 years. I kind of understand that. Tell us a little bit about your family. Oh, but before I go there, though, one of my pet peeves is just data and learning stuff. And Mexico City, I've always wanted to go there because at one time I think it had the largest population of any city in the world. And I just wanted, 24 million. At that time, I think it was 24 million people. And I'm like, wow, a city with 24 million people. How was it growing up in Mexico City for you? Do you still remember anything about that?
Yeah, in fact, I think when I was still there, it was still considered the largest city in the world. Now, still among the largest cities in the world. And it was super interesting. I feel very lucky that I got to grow up there because, one, I had a lot of friends, as a small child, but I also got to see and experience a lot of things that I wouldn't have otherwise. Like I got to experience what it's like to get into a super crowded subway as the only means of transportation available at the, for us. And, I got to see a lot of discrepancies like poverty and wealth, like living next to each other, commerce, like a lot of people, like just the different things that people do to earn a living, and people that are taking advantage of opportunities, people that don't. So, and I think that happens everywhere too, but I feel lucky that I got to see that there too.
Okay, well, we're going to talk a little bit about what you've been doing since you come to Minnesota, and it looked like a lot of that has to do with your background and experiences, what you saw growing up there. So let's talk a little bit about your education. You mentioned business management. I did a little research on you, as I want to do, and I saw some things about IT and engineering. I saw some stuff about intercultural communications. Why don't you fill us in on some of those type of educational endeavors that you've achieved in your lifetime?
Yeah, those last two items you mentioned were part of my master's. I do have a master's of science in management that I got in Vermont. And prior to that, I got my bachelor's in business administration. And, both degrees have been super helpful, obviously in different ways and in different jobs that I've had. But most importantly, I think that they have also served as examples, I think, to my daughter, to show that if you want to get a college degree and further, you can, as long as you want to.
Oh, great, great, great. And now you are a father. Do you just have that daughter? And tell us a little bit about your daughter.
Yeah, I'm a single dad of a almost 17-year-old teenage daughter who is great, as all parents say about their kids, and just started driving a few months ago, which is, again, super scary.
Yes. Well, yeah, that's the most scary time for a parent, to me at least. I mean, just out
Yep.
there driving, and it takes 10, 15, 20 years to really learn how to drive well and defensively. And I understand that you and your daughter are into fast cars and things also. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, we're both car people. So the business that I mentioned that I started with my dad was an auto repair shop. My dad was always a mechanic, and I grew up around cars. And I passed that on to my daughter, or I don't know if she was born with that. But yeah, we're both, we both watch Formula One, and we both like cars, and especially fast cars. In fact, my daughter won't drive anything that is not supercharged. So
Wait a minute. Teenager just learning how to drive and supercharge.
I know, Lacey. It's
Boy, how do you sleep at night when she's out driving?
I
Or
don't.
anytime she's out driving. Interesting story. My sons, they learn how to drive, and my oldest son, he wanted a Toyota Camry as a high school graduation present. And just a little story. We told him, I'm like, son, we're not going to buy you a Camry because you're going to wreck a few cars before you learn how to drive,
Right.
And a true story, we bought him a little Pontiac. And I think the first time he went out driving, he came back with a dented fender where he had an accident. So that's one of those stories there. My youngest one, though, I would ride with him to school every morning to just observe how he drive. And then I got in this situation where I would let him ride in the car with him and his friends and see how he acted and stuff. And he was pretty good at that. Okay, so let's talk about your career a little bit.
Yeah.
I saw where you worked at Pillsbury United Communities, and just a little inside also, I was a advisor on their charter school committee, and met a lot of people there. So tell us about your work there, and how did you like it, and the things that you did.
Yeah. So when I was over at Pillsbury, I was their policy person, and for the most part, I was working at the White House Center. Pillsbury has 5 centers.
Mhm.
I was housed at White House, and so a lot of that work had to do directly with issues that impact the Latino community, not just in the Minneapolis or Twin Cities area, but also, we got a lot into greater Minnesota. So we worked a lot and formed partnerships with folks in Austin, Albert Lee, Worthington, St. Cloud. And so it was pretty neat. Every year we would do a sort of like a couple of tours around the state, talking to people and about issues that were affecting their lives. And, we would create a legislative agenda based on that.
Oh, okay, okay. That sounds like a great job to have, as a matter of fact. And also, I see where you worked and still are working. I think the Minnesota Council on Latino Affairs. Tell us about your job there. I think I saw somewhere you were legislative and policy director there. Tell
Yeah,
us a
I'm the
little bit about
former
that.
senior legislative and policy director, and the job essentially of the council is to represent the interests of the Latino community, of all Latinos in Minnesota, at the legislature.
Okay.
So, it's the same essentially the same model where we partner with folks throughout the state, listen to the needs of the community, what issues or changes they would like to see. And then we work with the legislature to make that happen.
Give how many Latinos are in Minnesota? Do you know? Guess roughly.
Yeah, so Latinos comprise roughly around 6% of the total population. So currently there are over 300,000 Latinos in the
Okay.
state, 314,000.
Okay. And I see also, I think I read somewhere, as actually I saw your video, that you also stress working as an advocate for family and businesses. Is that correct?
Yep. My focus there is economic development and taxes. So a lot of my bills have to do with taxes, consumer protection, agriculture, because Latinos are big in agriculture too.
Okay.
And economic development. So we represent not just the interests of Latino individuals, but also Latino businesses at the legislature.
Okay. And taxes, that's a very broad subject area. Specifically, are you advocating for higher taxes, lower taxes, different types of taxes? What are you advocating over there at the Capitol, Felipe?
Right. So
And
when it
that's
comes to
what.
taxes, like tax fairness, making sure that all Latinos benefit from our tax programs, tax breaks for businesses or Latino businesses. But most importantly, we look at the tax code in general, because the tax code isn't just specifically for Latinos or non-Latinos, right? Like taxes affect everyone, and we're part of it. We are part of everyone as Latinos. So, we got to be at the table too.
Well, on an aside and a personal note, Philippe, I like low taxes.
I think everyone does. You're not alone.
Are you responsible for my taxes going up or going down, Philippe? Do you know? Do we
No,
know?
that's
No,
up to the legislature.
okay. Okay. So you talked about business development, and all businesses here in the country and the world, especially here in the Twin Cities, also have faced some very challenging times due to COVID, due to the riot, protests, and things like that. How were the Latino businesses impacted by these two issues?
Right. So as far as COVID, obviously, it depends on the business, right? Like some business did okay, like if they were a bar or a liquor store, I
Hmm.
guess I
Oh
should
yeah,
say. And others, if they were restaurants, they were not, they were not doing well, and so for that, the council was always making sure that people had the latest information as far as like small business loans, as far as grants for businesses affected. And so that was a lot of what the council was doing, and partnering with different organizations too, that like economic development organizations like LEDC, for example, the Latino Economic Development Center, to make sure that the information was reaching every Latino business in Minnesota.
Okay. And how many, do you have an idea how many businesses basically went out of business that they won't be able to recover? You have any? Any idea?
We don't have that data yet, just
Mm,
because some as the economy starts to open up again, some are still starting to open, and so it's hard to say who has closed for good and who's still like
okay.
ready to open or starting to open.
Okay. So those businesses that are struggling, what do you see as perhaps the one or two main things that we need to do now that we're coming out of this situation to help them basically rebuild, get back to the solid ground, and even grow after that? What are some of the maybe two or three things that we need to do for those businesses?
Right. I think the most obvious thing that we can do is obviously support the businesses, right? By eating there or shopping there, referring new business or new clients to them. And then the other, just creating that partnership where we're sharing information with them, and we're just sort of like part of that community where we can also ask them directly, like, what do you need? Like,
Hmm.
what would be most helpful to you? Because I think every business is different. Obviously, there are issues specific to industries, but also every business is in a different situation, I think. So.
Okay. The other thing, well, let me ask you this: are there any special needs that the Latino businesses need that other businesses do not need, or that's greater for them than other businesses? I shouldn't, yeah, put it like that, but are there any specific needs in that area?
I think one of the themes that I've come across is insurance. Some
Mm,
businesses
mhm.
that were affected by the protests, for example, were not insured, or their insurance didn't cover that type of damage, or and so I think that that type of education is crucial. As the people start to open up businesses, and just making sure that they are fully insured and insured against, or for situations that might come up, and also information about grants and loans, um, and help in filling out those walking them through that process, filling out those forms, because a lot of people just, they want to, they only have time to focus on running their business, right? They don't have
Right.
time to sit down for 2 hours, 3 hours and fill out forms that are in English, and sometimes they don't speak English. And so we've seen that a lot of Latino businesses have missed out on
Yeah.
loans and grants.
So, given that insurance companies are not in the charity business and things like that, what and I think I heard you mention some grants and things. What are the type of solutions that are being provided to those businesses that didn't have insurance?
Right. I think mostly it's just informational resources, right? So if you don't have insurance, if you didn't have insurance and now you have to rebuild, these are the things that exist that could help you, and these are the things that are coming, that will hopefully come, and the legislature will pass, that will be helpful to you and your business. So just it's just information that we can provide at this point, and trying to connect them with financial resources that are being provided by local governments.
Okay, and then one other thing, you mentioned that you do work in outstate Minnesota, and I kind of follow it in the paper. I do know that there are a lot of Latino population in a lot of these outstate cities.
Mhm.
What First of all, what outstate city besides the Twin Cities? What city has the greater number of Latinos besides the Twin Cities here?
Right. I would probably go with Worthington, Austin, Pelican Rapids. So a lot of the agricultural cities
Okay.
have large pockets of Latino populations.
Okay. And okay, well, we might come back and talk about that some more on another interview. Also, we talked about the impact that COVID and the protest had on the Latino businesses. And where I'm going with it, the protests was in response to the George Floyd killing, and the call for police reform and things like that, law enforcement reform. Give me an idea of the number of Latinos in law enforcement, if you know, in Minnesota and their participation?
Right. It's honestly, I don't know of a survey that
Mhm.
exists out there for as far as law enforcement, but little by little, the influx of Latinos into the force has been increasing. Like you
Mhm.
have the new sheriff, for example, in Hennepin County, who is from Latino descent. You have some officers within MPD that they are strong partners, and with the sheriff's department too, that are strong partners with community members, and they attend. So we would partner with them when I was with Pillsbury, where we would invite them to come and talk to community members around, security and how to stay safe, how to partner with the police, why they should, community policing. Um, and so, but it's hard. I don't have a number on that. I think that the number that we have is more around veterans. So we
Okay.
currently have over 5,000 Latino veterans in Minnesota.
Oh, wow. And these are veterans of World Vietnam and well, just Army veterans or so. Do you know which skirmish or war? Because we don't declare war hardly anymore. What skirmish most of them were involved in?
Right. I think a lot of them were involved. Well, obviously the older ones were involved in World War II. I got to
Oh,
meet
wow.
a veteran from World War II. In fact, I went to DC with him, and we met with Senator Klobuchar. And it was his first time going to DC and his first time seeing the memorial because he hadn't seen it.
Hmm.
And his son is a Vietnam veteran. And at the time, he was a commander of the Mexican American post in St. Paul.
Okay.
And so, we do have a network that we veterans that we partner with, and we also talk with them about the issues that affect them as veterans. And so we do that work at the legislature too.
Okay. And I realize there are a lot of different opinions and things within the Latino community. So I'm not going to dub you this key one spokesman for the whole community, and I know there's different opinions out there. But how is law enforcement generally perceived in the Latino community here in Minnesota and Twin Cities and things like that? In general, how do you see that in the relationship between that community
Right.
and law
So
enforcement?
from what I've seen, I think it's a mix. A lot of folks are have had negative experiences with law enforcement because
Mhm.
they keep getting pulled over. Obviously, if folks are not eligible for a driver's license and they get pulled over, they could end up, at the end, deported even just for driving. At the same time, there's also a sense of need for security and order within the community. So I think it depends on who you're talking to within the Latino community. I personally I've had both experiences, negative and positive,
Mhm.
um, and I would say that it varies
Okay.
depending on who you're talking to.
Okay. So you brought up deportation, and once again, in the spirit of keeping it 100 here, let's talk a little bit about immigration. I know that you served with the some center that supported immigrants. Why don't you tell me about the name of the organization you work for and the type of work you did for them?
Yeah, so for about 4 years, I was the policy person um, for ILCM, the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota.
Mhm.
And so we did a lot of work with the state legislature, but also with members of Congress. So we would fly to DC and do some lobbying there because immigration is federal law. Um, but there are also state laws that affect immigrants as well. And so we did a lot of work around, the driver's license issue, right? Allowing all Minnesotans to have access to a driver's license, regardless of immigration status. Um, we did work around the English only bills,
Mhm.
and around um, copycat laws that were passing at the time in different states that were very anti-immigrant.
mhm.
So we would do work here to try to block that from happening, just
Okay.
to try to protect the community as much as we could.
So explain to our audience, what are the conditions or situations in these countries in South America and Central America that's driving uh, immigrants to cross the borders and things like that, and make these long, dangerous journeys, and hook up with traffickers and, and things like that. People who assault
Yeah,
women. What's driving this? Well, and let me put it in a more specific kind of personal way. What would motivate a parent to send that child on that long journey? So give our audience some idea of what's motivating people to do that.
right. So several reasons, but I can tell you that nobody wants to leave their country. Nobody wants to leave their families behind. Nobody wants to send their kids alone to who knows where and who
Right.
knows how, right? And
Hmm.
not knowing what's going to happen to them. Like no one would do that unless they truly did not have any other choice.
Hmm.
Um, and so some of the reasons why that ends up happening is uh, poverty, crime, persecution, political persecution, and corruption, and a lot of that, not every, not for in it doesn't apply to all of those reasons, but a big part of why that exists in those countries is because of foreign policies that affect them in a negative way, right? So we
Hmm.
had NAFTA for many years that had a very negative impact in the rural areas in those countries where people were losing their land because they couldn't sell their corn, for example, within their own country, because American corn was cheaper
Right.
than local corn, thanks to the subsidies that people benefit from here in the U.S. And so by them losing their land, they really had nothing left. So then they would come north to the U.S. to just do any type of work and be able to send money back. So that's one example of how foreign
Right.
policy affects those countries.
So, Philippe, I'm into root cause solution and long term solution.
Mhm.
How do how do we fix that? Is it fixable? I mean, is it
Right.
well? And by the way, I do have some knowledge of the history of South America and Central America and policy and things like that, U.S. policy and a lot of them. So, how is it fixable? And how do we fix it?
Honestly,
And how long does it take?
I think it would take a lot of work and, both external and internal, right? So
Mhm.
external, we have to, make sure that our foreign policies are set to help those countries and not take advantage of them. And internally, those countries have to fix their own issues with crime and with corruption, right? Because even
Right,
if
right.
you can send all the help that you can to those countries, but if there's a lot of corruption, none of that is going to trickle down to those who actually do need it.
Okay.
So it's a tough road.
Right, right. So, what do we say, Philippe, to those people who really care and about the people coming here and who's suffering and things like that? However, they say do it legally. Come here legally. What do you say to the people? Say, look, we're for immigrants, but legal immigrants.
Mhm.
What? Let's start that discussion. What do you say to people?
So I have been told that many times, like, oh yeah, we
Hmm.
support this, but as long as they do it legally. And the answer is, yeah, I think that if we had a process that people could follow to be here legally,
Hmm.
I believe that people would follow that process. But we currently don't have a process in place for legal immigration. And
Okay.
so if there isn't a process for folks to follow, then there's nothing that they can do. So if, for example, if they said, well, you have to have a driver's license to drive, and you would say, okay, well, how do I get one? And then they would say, well, you can't. Then well, what do you do?
Okay, Felipe. Some people look at that as not saying the current situation as not saying you can't. It's just saying you might have to wait 10, 20 years for it. And we agree that that's broken. But if we use the DMV analysis, there are people standing in line at the DMV. And what do you say to the people that, because that's something in our human nature. We don't like to see people skipping the line, that's right. When we skip the line. So there's a lot of people standing in line, and they're looking at these people, quote unquote, as they see it, skipping line and getting away with it. What do you say to those people that say it's unfair to the people who, regardless of how bad the process is, regardless how bad the DMV is, these people are waiting in line, and you're finding a back door around the line? What do you say to the people who have those type of perspective on what's going on?
Yeah, so when you see people standing in line at the DMV, they're standing in line to wait their turn with their form in hand, right? Mm-hmm. To do whatever they need to do at the DMV. When it comes to immigration, there is no form. So even if they want to stand in line, there's nothing to stand in line for. Like, there's no form, there's no process for legal immigration. So if they say, well, you come here legally, there isn't a window. There's no process that exists for people to come here legally. So, they won't be holding anything when they're standing in line.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
I don't want to press you too much on this, but people do see people taking the American citizenship test and coming in the country as legal citizen. So there got to be some line or some form somewhere that somebody's, even though it's a bad process and the form might be. What do you say when people say, well, we see these other citizens doing it legally, and they're taking the citizenship test, and they're walking out of the whatever federal building, they're waving their American citizenship paperwork. What do you say to those people?
Right. So, for that to happen, you must have been here in the U.S. legally already, either because you married a U.S. citizen, or because your parents brought you and they sponsored you, or a family member sponsored you, or your job sponsored you, or you came from a country where that is eligible for you to be a refugee, or some conflict happened, or a natural disaster happened in your country, and so then you were able to come here that way. Right now, the only way that you can come here legally is situational, unless it's through family or marriage or through your work.
Okay. And you did work at a law center, I think it was. What do you say to the people that says you got to obey the law? Everybody has to obey the law.
Yeah, we all have to obey the law, right? Like, that's I don't think anyone is saying no to that. Okay. And so when it comes to immigration, I think that's when we then look at the human side of things, and why people are deciding to come here regardless, right? And that's because there just is no other way, and because of the poverty, because of the persecution that exists due to, again, we go back to the root causes.
Right. Okay, and one last thing on that, though, because I always like to talk solutions. Mm-hmm. Is this issue solvable? And if so, how do we solve it?
Right. It's not easy. For many years, even from my time at the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota, we were pushing for comprehensive immigration reform. Some sort of process for the folks that are already here, and a process for folks that want to come here, so that they can, like you say, stand in line and wait their turn, because then there will be a process for them to follow, and so that would be the only solution, I guess. Okay. Having some sort of reform to our immigration system that puts a process in place that, for people.
And you might not know this, my background is technical in engineering. So the logical extension of letting them in is, the question is there a limit to the number of people seeking asylum to it, or should we just let anyone who's poor and fleeing poverty into the country? Is it, I mean, as American citizen, taxpayers and job seeking, is there a limit? Does it just whoever want to come, we let them in? And I know the words on the Statue of Liberty, so but I'm assuming even when the French wrote that, no, the French didn't write it. They had a contest. Whoever wrote that, they didn't think that you're going to let anybody in the world just come into the country, and as many as one, and everybody that's suffering, we
Right.
take them in. Because to me, Felipe, that would be like your house and letting everybody in your house that need a place to stay or food to eat. You just let them in. So, what do you respond to that type of perspective of the situation that we're in?
Right. No, we currently do have caps to the number of refugee visas that are extended. We do have caps on the situational, thing processes that I was mentioning. So it's not a free for all per se, and it's not an open door policy. Like we do have those systems in place.
You've been very good on this. One last question on that. Do we know how many immigrants, undocumented workers are here? I mean, I've been hearing 11 million for the past 30 years. I mean, it just doesn't make common sense. That number has been stuck on 11 million for the last 30 years. Do we have any estimate of how many undocumented or illegal immigrants are in this country?
Right. I've heard also from anywhere from 11 to 12 million, also for years. And, the reason why it stays within that range is because people come in, but also at the same time, people are being sent back. And so
That's a good
sometimes
answer.
you might, sometimes you might hear people say, well, we're at a 0% illegal immigration right now. And that doesn't mean that no one's coming in. It just means that the number of people coming in is the same or less than the number of people being sent back.
Okay, that's a logical explanation on a high level. Okay, crunch the numbers. So that's a good answer. So thank you for being patient with us. I'm wrapping it up right now. Is there anything or any area that you'd like to comment on that I have not been thoughtful enough to bring up, Felipe? And if so, go for it.
No, I mean, I think just for folks that are not familiar with our community, Latinos are in different sectors of our workforce. We're heavily involved in agriculture. We are entrepreneurs, politicians, professionals, doctors. My daughter's doctor that has seen her since she was born is Latina, for example, and teachers. Like one of my cousins is a teacher at a middle school. Dentists, whatever, professionals, and in the trades as well. So folks are here. We are one of the largest, the fastest growing populations in the state. We're still a young population in Minnesota. We haven't been here for very long in the state, as in other states. And the majority of the people are in Minnesota of Latinos are on the younger side than the older side. But again, we're growing fast. And Latinos within the Latino community, we have an array of folks that are coming from different countries. And so there's a lot of richness and culture associated with our community. And so, it's, and we're large contributors to our economy as well. So yeah, just putting that out there.
What positive message would you like to leave, I guess, both for the Latino community in Minnesota and just the communities i- in general?
Well, you were talking about wealth creation, and so I think that that's important for any community, right? To
Hmm.
to get involved in educating your young ones on how to create wealth and financial literacy is crucial, especially for growing communities. I was talking to my daughter about that the other day, and we were having a conversation around money, and she asked me the best question she could have asked. She said, "Well, why don't they teach this in school?"
Oh, yeah,
And I was,
that is it. Yep, yep.
it's like exactly. That's the
Hmm.
that's the question to ask, right?
Hmm.
Because they just don't. So unless your parents know this and pass this on to you, it's up to you to learn on your own, and a lot of people don't.
Yeah, my three subjects that I have a pet peeve on that the schools don't teach is financial management and finance and how that work, the law and legal things. Everybody should know that.
Mhm.
I mean, if you
Right.
think about it,
Oh yeah.
the two things that the government can take from you is your freedom and your money. And the schools, who are supposed to be a government entity educating us, totally avoid that. And of course, the other thing is civics. I just have civics and history. I guess I'll combine those two things. And I tell
Hmm.
people, if you don't know your rights and know the Constitution, you don't know when they're taking them away from you.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I mean, I just see some serious consequences now of people not being knowing civics and things like that. In fact, I think I saw a poll where it says most Americans can't pass the immigration test with just basic fundamental government type things. Most American can't pass it. And if that's not an indictment on our public education system, I don't know what is.
Right.
So one other thing that I got to talk to you about, Philippe.
Of
Uh,
course.
uh, I've been looking for the best Mexican or any Latino restaurant in the Twin Cities. And we'll stick with Mexican now because I'm gonna call you up about the others. I know we got Brazilians, we got all kinds of Latino restaurants here, but the best
Mhm.
Mexican restaurant that you would recommend in the Twin Cities. And before you answer that, I put in a plug what everybody sent me when I asked that question. They sent me to La Cucarachi on I think it's Dale over in St. Paul, or right off of Grand La Cucarachi. I think they are still there. But what would you recommend?
Right.
Two or three recommendations. And next time you go in there, they better give you a free meal. So what would you
No
recommend as
kidding,
restaurants
right?
here for me to go if I'm looking for a good Mexican meal,
Of
Philippe?
course. Yeah, I would definitely recommend going to Maya Cuisine. They have a location in Northeast Minneapolis and one in Roseville,
Okay.
and going over to Los Ocampo. They have several
Oh yeah. Okay.
locations.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep,
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I've seen those. And Maya, you're spelling that Maya?
correct.
Okay, okay. I'm gonna look those up. So once again, I genuinely appreciate you being our guest this evening. I genuinely appreciate your openness and honesty and just general demeanor and answer these questions. And any guests we have on here locally, I'm gonna plan on meeting them sometime in person for lunch or something like that. So
Mhm.
before you go, as we wrap up, if anyone want to contact the Minnesota Council on Latino Affairs, how would they go about doing that? And let's assume that they're not the new generation that Googles everything. How would they go about doing that?
Right. Well, they can go to their website, mn.gov/MCLA.
Mhm.
And so then that'll take them to the main website, and they can choose staff, like specific staff members and issues, and they can look at the legislative agenda for the council,
Okay.
and the general number as well.
Okay. So once again, really appreciate you being on here. I'm assuming your daughter's 17. She's a senior in high school, or she's
She's almost 17, so she's a junior in high school right now.
okay. Okay. Well, good luck on to her and you, and blessings to
Thank
you
you.
and her graduating next year and going
Mhm.
on to bigger and better things. And you might want to not put it in those turbocharged. Now I'm just teasing. Uh,
I like them too.
yeah, I know you guys bond over repairing cars, and you're telling me about how you rebuilt engines and things like that, and I love it. So once
Yeah.
again, Felipe, thank you very much, and thank you for educating me and the audience and everything. We'll be forever grateful. So you have a
No,
good evening.
anytime.